everyone. So I'm the manager of the Open edX team here at edX, which means that I'm responsible for sort of helping grow, enable the community of contributors, making the Open edX platform that edX.org runs on successful, and helping all of you in the community contribute to that project. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our annual conference, which we just confirmed is going to be June 14th to 17th at Stanford University, actually. So this will be the first time. This will be the third conference that we have. This will be the first time we're not holding it in Boston. So I understand that means that there's travel implications for everyone, but I really hope that some of you can come out and join us out there. And we're really excited to be working with our partners out there. We have some really great friends at Stanford and in that community. I think it's going to be a really great opportunity to learn more about what people are doing in that area. UC Berkeley is also out there. So, the breakdown of the days, the first 2 days, we're going to have sort of a traditional conference structure. It's going to be talks and keynotes and those sorts of traditional conference activities, people talking about how they're using the platform, what tools they're building, all those sorts of things. The second 2 days, Thursday and Friday, the 16th and 17th, we're calling those hands-on days. In past years, we've had just a hackathon. This year, we're exploring sort of doing more structured hands-on activities, workshops, tutorials, trainings, those sorts of things. But we expect that all to actually be community-driven. So that's where also you all come in, not just attending the conference, but also helping make the conference a great event by proposing talks, proposing tutorials, workshops, things about what you're doing and how you want to share it with the community, how you want to get people involved in your projects and the great ideas that you all have. So our call for proposals right now is open. There's a bit.ly link here. We'll send out another email around to the whole group so that you have that ready. You don't have to write down a bit.ly link or anything. There's a couple of ideas of kind of topics about tools, extensions, interesting courses, how Open edX has impacted an organization that you've worked with, technical deep dive in infrastructure, a workshop on open source project that you have going or want to get started, things like that. Those are some of the sort of ideas, but really we're open to anything and everything that you guys want to talk about related to the Open edX platform. And then also just a plug for registering early. Registration fees are all up here. There's $50 off if you register before March 1st. Follow us on Twitter at Open edX for more updates on the conference. And hashtag Open edX 2016. That's it.
If you can't make it out to Stanford, one of the things we're going to be doing here in the spring is trying to get Boston area people heading to Stanford, doing rehearsals of their talks for the conference here. So we'll have people working through their material and getting people here to be able to see it, even if they can't go to Stanford. And the live streaming. So don't bother coming to the Open edX meetup because you don't need to, because we're going to live stream it, I guess. So by the way, we are recording tonight. That camera over there. So if you do not wish to be on camera, sit on that side of the room. And I didn't mention my name. My name is Ned Batchelder. So this sticker says I am Ned X, which is way too clever, and I won't do it next time. So the other thing I want to say is that because we're still getting our feet together as a community, I'm looking for ideas of topics. We have a topic for February. It's going to be an instructional design hands-on exercise led by someone from Extension Engine, Nathan from Extension Engine, and I forget her name, from Boston University, but they're going to work together on instructional design exercise, which should be really interesting. Julie Mullen, right. Anyway, it's going to be great. We're going to figure out who's doing it, and it's going to be great. So tonight what we're talking about is research, and the reason we're doing research is because it's something I personally know very little about. I work here at edX. I've been here for 3 years. I'm a software engineer. I do work, when I'm not doing community work, I tend to do technical work at the deepest levels of the software, so I don't have much connection to the universities who are using the software and what they do with it, and then even farther out from the courseware, the research that happens. But it's one of the 3 things that edX has been chartered to do: make education widely available, improve on-campus education, and do research into online education. And so I didn't know much about it, so I asked Nina and Piotr to come and talk about it. And they said, what should I talk about? And I said, I don't know, research. And that's what I gave them, and they're going to tell us about it. Right? Right, okay.
That's what we're supposed to do?
That's what, oh no, what are you talking about cats? Oh no. All right, so you should hook up this microphone. Unless you want to use the handheld.
Yes. So thank you for that introduction.
Stand here.
Sure. Then I'll just. So, I am the chief scientist here. Nina is the director of academics and research. And
Yeah.
okay, and roughly speaking, we'll talk about. We've done a couple of talks to subsegments of this audience, either going over all of the research at edX in breadth, the frameworks for research. This one will be a little bit different, just not more people. We'll go over three things. We'll do a very quick introduction to edX as a research platform. Then we'll do a couple of deep dives on some projects we've done both at edX and outside of edX. So this device doesn't actually. Oh, the arrows aren't working either? Right. That's a pity. Okay, so you guys figure this out, and I'll keep going for a little bit. edX has three prongs to its mission, one of which is research. The other two are quality of education and access to education. Since this is one of our big prongs, we've put a lot of effort into it, and we have roughly three ways in which we do research. What most people think associated with research is big data and data analysis. And indeed, since we were MITx, we've collected data on virtually everything that is done at the platform. We do a lot of deep dives into that. What I think is a lot more interesting actually are interventions. And there are two types of interventions we do. One is interventions in content. Try two different ways to do a video, different ways to do problems, different ways to deliver content to users, and see what effect that has on learner outcomes. And active interventions, where we develop custom components that have interactives, change the way that the user interface behaves, and see the outcomes of those. Okay. We've published some number of publications within edX on different projects that we've done, but the ecosystem around edX, by the way, you should be up here as well.
I'll let you take the stage.
Okay.
Come down here.
So there's, by the way, all of you should also cackle. I'm a very bad speaker, and you're what makes the talk. So interrupt me, poke at me, prod at me. Thank you. So we have some number of publications we've written, but if you look at Google Scholar for edX Learning, you get a much larger number of results. Google Scholar says 12,000. I think it's a lot less than that, but it's still a very substantial number. There's a whole research industry around books at this point, conferences like Learning at Scale, Learning with Books, and we've driven a lot of that. We are probably the most significant of the platforms as a research platform here. Within edX, as I said, we do data analysis. This is an analysis I did a while ago where I just took all of the problems of the edX platform. So we have about 12,000, or at the time we had about 12,000 problems within edX across our courses. And on each of those problems, I compared how students in the US perform on them to how students in the developing world, defined as GDP per capita of less than $3,000, perform on them. And we saw there were some problems where students in the developing world did better than the students in the US, but there was a large number of problems on this end where they did a lot worse. This metric correlated with language, cultural differences, socioeconomic status, a lot of different things, so that we could do a deeper dive into these problems and see what caused students around the world to underperform students in the US by that much. So that's big data, data analysis.
What's nice about this line, right, is the majority of the problems are understandable by both inside the U.S. and out. So we have a pretty good track record of mostly understandable, problems
Yeah, this is not bad. This is actually pretty good as far as traditional educational assessments. But what's more interesting is doing active interventions. And the way that we do this is we typically start with something that learning science tells us about learning. One of the things that we know is that misconceptions are critical to learning. We need to address misconceptions. If a student is confused, doesn't have prior knowledge, misunderstands prior knowledge, we need to do a deep dive there. We have a number of techniques by which we handle misconceptions on the platform. If you want to know about them, you'll have to interrupt me, which so far only one person has done. Thank you. But one particular one that we had an idea was to source remediations for these from our learners. So we put it in the Civil component. It's an XBlock where students could contribute resources that they thought were related to something, either Wikipedia articles, web pages, whatever they thought was most relevant to a problem that other students might be. This is a problem students might be working on. They could up and down vote these, flag these, whatever else, standard techniques that you can see on the web. And then we want to see the effect of this. So first we launched the course. We saw how it behaved, just sort of anecdotally, fixed some of the UX flaws. Then we started to look at data about how users use this. Drop-off curves of how these students were the problem versus interacting with this in different ways. It's a remediation tool, so as we expected, a minority of the students used it. We looked at the depth of remediations that were contributed. Our thesis was that by providing these resources, you would have much deeper remediations. And we...
Is the remediation tool only shown when a student gets something wrong?
No.
Repeat the question.
It is the remediation tool only shown when a student gets something wrong? And the answer is no, it is not. That works very well for things like algebraic errors. And we've crowdsourced hints in response to specific student errors as well. That worked exceptionally well. In most cases, when a student gets stuck on a problem, it happens before they get to an answer. So a student will first try to understand the problem, formulate a strategy for solving the problem, execute that strategy, and possibly check their answer. And most students will get stuck during one of those two first steps, at least for questions of the type you see in a physics course, computer science course. So it's available all of the time. And we saw that they were deeper remediations. Then we wanted to see performance of students who interacted with this tool. And guess which group performed better? Students who interacted with the recommender or ones who didn't? Who interacted?
Interactive.
Nope. Exactly what we would expect. The students who were stuck interacted with the recommender, and it sometimes helped them, it sometimes didn't. Students who clicked on the recommender underperformed students who didn't. So that's actually the problem with big data. The problem with big data is that's my interpretation of the data. It may be incorrect. And we run into a lot of correlation and causation issues like this when we're dealing with edX data. We did do a randomized control trial. In that randomized control trial, we saw that if students were, half of the students were not given the chance to interact with the recommender, half of them were given the recommender. The students who were given the recommender tool achieved similar outcomes, statistically identical, but in 10% less time. So it seemed to improve learning efficiency. Now, the next challenge that we had was it was actually very hard to do this analysis. We did a randomized control trial. Half of the students got this tool, half of the students didn't, and we couldn't get statistical significance doing naive things. One of the challenges is we talk about big data. We've had a tremendous growth in our number of learners, very nice exponential. We've had a much steeper exponential in our growth of number of courses, and that means that the number of students per course is actually a lot smaller now than in the early days of WOOC. So when we do an intervention like this, the number of students we were looking at was about 1,400. And we expect this trend to continue. So a degree field like neuroscience has about 3,000 graduates in the US every year. If we get 10% market penetration in the steady state, a course in advanced neuroscience would have maybe 300 students take it every year. A university like MIT has 2,000 courses. Universities in general probably have about 10,000. It's a very large number of courses, so these numbers may continue to be not that big on a per course basis. So to do this kind of analysis, one of the things that we had to do was called principal stratification. That means that we had to group the students by how active they were in the course and compare across cohorts. That reduces your noise substantially. A second thing that we had to do was normalize the data. So instead of looking at the amount of time that they spent with a problem, we looked at the log of the amount of time. And that makes the distribution of time, instead of having this very long tail, look roughly like a normal distribution. And at that point, we got a row of 2%, so very good confidence that this was in fact helping students. So that's sort of the research and design flow that we use within edX as we're developing these features. Oh, terrific.
So, I'm not sure if my question will even make sense, because I'm not, looking at the data, a summary doesn't give you all the details, but a lot of research in cognitive load theory talks about help with problem solving specifically, and that, partially solved problems help non-experts significantly better than an expert, and in that time you have to reverse the kind of help they get. So when you're collecting the data, what are you looking for with regards to helpers? Are they like?
They are just a student body in all of these cases. So the question was, actually, there's a lot of literature that suggests that for remediation of misconceptions specifically, novices do a better job than experts because they understand those misconceptions better. Experts do better in terms of giving overall conceptual understanding, creating assessments, structure of the course. Novices build remediations more effectively. And the question was, what population are we getting the remediation from? And the answer is we are getting them from the students in all of these cases. We've had 3 experiments with crowdsourcing remediations. One was using a community question answering system in our original course, 6 double quicks. A second one was remediations that were hints to incorrect responses, and this was a third one, which is a list of recommended resources. In all cases, these were contributed by students who were active in the course. We got different populations of those students contributing in the different cases, different types of remediations, but they were always coming from the students themselves. And that's actually a very big advantage that we have, because we have a large number of learners. We can source some of the content from instructors, some from the learners, and exactly target it towards experts and novices based on who is most able to contribute.
So I have a follow-up question. Does the time they take, has your data shown that it's directly affected by the number of resources that students have made available? So that if there's more resources, the time to solve the problem actually goes down?
We saw that giving the recommender reduced the time. We did not look at the data in that level of depth. The result that it cut 10% of the time was, that result was about 2 weeks old, and we have not done deeper dives into that beyond that. By the way, most of this analysis was done by Daniel Lee, who is a PhD student at MIT. He is a Chinese citizen, so we cannot hire him, but he will be going out the job market soon, and he is fantastic.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. So the next problem that we have is, as we're analyzing this data, is looking at issues of different types of sample bias, where, for example, we have a large amount of drop-off in books. It's not what the press tells you. It's not 95 or 98%. Those are very artificial numbers, but it still happens quite a bit. And if we do one of these interventions, it's hard to differentiate by, do we improve performance of learners, or are we doing something where more advanced learners stay with us and more beginning learners drop off at slightly larger numbers? We have a lot of issues like this around that data analysis. I already mentioned a lot of issues around correlation and causation, but I think from there I'll let Nina take over with research done outside of edX.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Dan, for inviting us here tonight. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what I do. So I joined edX in July as Director of Academics and Research, and vis-a-vis research, my role, as should be made perfectly clear by Peter's presentation, is I don't do the research. That's Peter's job. But one of the things that I do is I pay attention to what research is happening in this space and try and bring that back into edX in ways that I'll demonstrate in a moment. and also facilitate research that's happening at our university partners in various ways, whether it's helping them with collaborations, helping them get get their data and make their data in a way that's readable, and so forth. So that's part of my role. So I'm going to talk specifically about how, as I'm paying attention to research that's happening in the space, how we kind of bring it externally back into edX internally. So, and I'm just picking on 3, research projects to demonstrate this with. So one of them was, oh, there's a question already. Sorry, yes.
I had a question about the stuff that Piotr presented
Absolutely.
for you.
Yes.
Okay, so with analysis like that, where you do some initial data collection and you don't have significance with the initial measures, how often would you say with edX it's sort of incumbent upon the researcher to come up with a cooler analysis technique, or how often can you kind of, great, let's throw this at another population, or let's get this in edX in a more widespread way? How often can you just get more data?
So the question was, how often can we, essentially, based on some of the research we do internally, perhaps compel the researchers to take these questions up, or ourselves expand these research projects to get more significant results?
Yeah,
No.
I
Sort of? No?
I guess just I just always imagine edX as like a giant pool of infinite data. So if I did a study and I didn't get significance, I'd be like, great, let's go get more data. Let's slightly change the user interface and get is that a viable approach, or?
We wish it was.
Oh.
We wish it was.
Yeah, do you want to take that one? Yeah.
So our course content is in control of the course authors and not edX. So anytime we do an experiment like this, we call up course authors and say, hey, do this experiment with us. This was incredibly hard to do when we were at 7 courses. Now that we are at close to 1,000 courses, it's incredibly easy to get participating course steps into experiments. And if it's, let's get a little bit more data, let's have 1 or 2 more courses, that's not a big deal. If it's let's run it across all edX students, that's actually incredibly hard.
Thank you. And I think one of the ways in which Piotr and I work together is that if I know that there is an interest in having a larger project, Piotr has his finger really on the pulse of what's going on, his capacity to be able to make those relationships come together. He actually has initiated some really interesting A/B tests just this term recently in courses that are running now, reached out to those course teams, reached out to those university partners and said, hey, are you willing to do this? And they say, yeah, and then we do it.
That was actually your predecessor who reached out to them.
There you go.
So said, Remy reached out to them, and
Great.
Now we're doing that together.
There we go. Yeah. So that's kind of how it works. We're still developing that practice. I think, with me being on board and so forth, we're still developing that practice. So, yeah.
The biggest challenge here is actually when it's not us doing the research. We have access to all of the data, and so we need that just, hey, let's have a course staff participate. The biggest challenge is when a university partner, Daniel, for example, was doing research, and at that point, exchanging that with universities becomes very hard because there's a regulatory framework, FERPA, that university has to comply with. Once you get lawyers involved, that's when it gets slow and messy.
I think I'll just continue on. We do have somewhat of a solution for that, but I'll continue on. If people have questions about how we're attending to that, I'm happy to talk about it. So again, this was an early piece of MOOC research about courses that were on edX. It was done by David Pritchard and a team over at MIT on an introductory physics course. And one of the reasons why I'm highlighting this is that this particular piece of research and David and his team got a lot of attention because it was an early piece of research that tried to answer the question, do people really learn anything in MOOCs? And that was particularly important to those of us invested in MOOC learning because, as you know, in 2012, 2013, there was a sort of a huge resistance or backlash to whether or not there was any real learning happening. And granted, this is a discrete course. It has very rich problem sets and interactive learning in it. So we can't say that for all courses, because not all courses are equal. I mean, any student on campus knows that, right? So, but he did discover in this pre and post test methodology that there was significantly and roughly equal learning on campus as there were in the MOOC. And this actually held true across different cohorts. So even students who came to the material in the MOOC or on campus that had low ability, they still saw gains more so if they took the MOOC than if they took the on campus, or about the same. So even advanced learners had an increase in the post-test, so did low ability learners. So this was really great for us. I mean, not just for a PR thing, but kind of helped us socialize that there is, if a course is well designed, there is definitely learning happening in this. And I imagine this is not any surprise to this group. So some other research to highlight. This came out of Learning at Scale that happened earlier last year. This is an interesting test of peer learning systems. In particular, this group looked at two pieces of software, Talkabout and Peer Studio. Talkabout allows students to put together a kind of hangout sort of environment, and it's peer-driven. They can put it's like doing a virtual study hall, study time. And then Peer Studio is a way to do reviews of each other's work. Well, those things are wonderful. We know that peer learning can have incredible gains for students, but one of the things that these researchers wanted to address is that you can't just provide the tool, students won't go to it, right? There's a lot of resistance actually to working in peers or doing any kind of peer work. And so what this particular research did is looked at the places where students, even when given the option, don't take it up, right? So you can't assume that they're going to auto-magically participate. What can you do? What kind of intervention can the instructor, the course teams do to get people to use the software, use the intervention, and so forth? So they came up with a really nice rubric of ways in which you need to encourage students, point them to it, make it a valuable experience for them. We would use this kind of research to incorporate into best practices to our course teams, right? So something like this comes out, we can learn from that. This is sort of part of my job. And to then see how we can incorporate that either into the training materials that we provide to our partners, to the course teams, put it into documentation, workshops, and so forth. So I'm always looking out for this kind of stuff that can be incorporated to that process. And then finally, I'll just highlight this last one. This also came from Learning at Scale most recently. And this is an annotation system that was developed, and the research is simply looking at the ways in which students can receive a kind of almost face-to-face like response or feedback to their work. And it's a really cool tool. First of all, it's a really cool tool where a student can present their work to the instructor, and then the instructor can go in and do inline comments. They can actually leave voice comments. So sometimes if you get a paper back from an instructor and they've written scribble on the side, and either one, you can't read what they've written, or you can't comprehend what they mean, here's an additional opportunity to actually leave a voice, it's like a voicemail, explaining what the comments are. And there are other really rich annotations available. The reason why I wanted to highlight, yeah. Sorry, yeah.
So I teach online and I have a blind student. Would this work with, a reader?
Yes. Yes, it would work with a screen reader. The question is this tool accessible? The answer is it was not accessible initially. At this point, it is accessible. It parses a PDF. It works with a screen reader. We're very excited about this. We work to help make that happen.
Perfect. Thank you.
We care deeply about accessibility.
So one of the reasons why I wanted to highlight this, in addition to this being just a really cool tool, is that this is an example of how external research really became internal, in that one of the authors of this paper, and who is a developer of the Rich Review, Dong-Hyuk Yoon, ended up interning with Piotr at edX and developing this tool further and writing research papers about it, and developed an XBlock for this. So that's what we have to present to you, ways in which research are happening inside of edX, outside of edX, and how we're bringing it back into the platform. So we would like to take questions if you have them.
So I have a question.
This is actually Lewis's question. But Lewis doesn't want to ask it. So
No,
Lewis,
I'm willing to ask.
ask it. Stand
Okay. All right. Hi, Louis Gadima from AppSembler. We're an Open edX service provider. So this is our research for this group. Although I thought we would do it at the beginning and the end, we'll do it right in the middle. So we just wanted to find out, because we helped organize this meetup too, who's here? So how many people here are undergraduate or graduate students? Okay, only a few. How many people here are software engineers? Quite a lot. How many people here work in academia in educational research and such? A few. University instructors? People from the private sector, from private companies? A few.
edX
All right.
employees.
Thank you.
That was a great diversity. I love that. That was really wonderful. Thank you so much. Other questions, surveys, whatever. Yeah.
Okay, so my question goes right back to the beginning when Fiona was speaking about and showed the graph with, you know, the few little bias problems at the end. And so, you know, do you do any research on those problems with bias, right? Because I feel like somehow for the whole of education, right, that, you know, somebody put them in there in the first place, right? That is something which might have some broader value outside edX. And if so, you know, what are you doing and what have you come up with?
So the question was whether or not we're taking a close look at those questions that have bias or not answered very well by folks outside the U.S. or not very well by, in some cases, folks inside the U.S. and what we might be doing to correct that.
We looked at the problems. We have not published on this yet. That's purely a question of time and resources. We looked at those problems, and then there was a range of reasons why this happened. I would not say that there was any commonality. One of the problems was from a course in astrophysics, and the question had where you get back of X is apparently this, where in that case apparently meant is not, but to any foreign language speaker, it would mean is. So there were issues of raising like that. There were a lot of different issues. Our goal in doing this analytic was to be able to provide this as an analytic to instructors in real time eventually. So an instructor runs a course, has problems to use both on campus and in a book. That instructor get data from the book that can be used in her to improve the on-campus course. If an instructor sees my problem is in this full from the big data, both in the next round of the book and in the residential course, that can stop happening. We still need to do more analysis to figure out if there are common patterns where we can identify this ahead of time. When we look at those problems, this was done in 2014. At the time, we didn't have enough patterns to be able to consistently, for example, throw a machine learning algorithm and say, in advance, this problem will show bias. We could do it kind of retroactively. So we still need to integrate. This was research, but we're hoping to integrate it and use that to impact.
So these 12,000 problems were selected from universities from all around the world?
These were the problems that were on edX in our MOOCs.
But on edX, it's
edX has about, I think, how many partners now?
Now, 90 and 90
So
something.
these are all from.
Yes, we have
Probably 10
courses.
we had, well, less than that. I don't know.
I don't know, probably 50, 70, that's sort of ballpark. But yeah, we have we have partners in China, in India, I think in Africa at this point, and all over Europe.
And subjects, any particular subjects?
This was in all subjects. I mean, that's sort of actually the challenge of being edX. Traditional edtech is K to 12. You've got 100 courses. edX is university level. We have a tremendous number of disciplines, courses, and whatever else, and we can't target one of those specifically. It's university education involves thousands of courses. You can't get away from that. That's a very different type of problem.
You mentioned accessibility, and I had a question about whether or not there's been any data suggesting people's ability, whether they're visually impaired or hearing impaired or physically impaired in terms of using this tool.
Which tool?
Using the platform, using courses on.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the simple answer is we don't know because we don't ask that kind of information of our registrants. And so we would not necessarily know what impairments they're bringing to the platform unless they were part of some sort of pool or were part of a research group doing that.
I think we actually have a fair bit of that data. So what happens is students with accessibility issues have in the past emailed us. We provide contact information from them if they run into problems. We would engage them in dialogues to figure out what problems they were running into. So we have both that information from students. We also hired Mark Zadatsky, who was the accessibility expert at the W3C. He is now in-house and he's helping bring that platform up to standards, and he has incredibly broad experience. So the combination of his experience in general accessibility and those just one-on-one conversations with a student emailing our accessibility email and us just having a dialogue. In one case, there was a very interesting conversation. A student had a detached retina. They had a very hard time moving side by side from the video with the subtitles on the side, and we have those dialogues.
Yeah, I think to your point, one of the things we might look at is whether or not our learner support tickets around accessibility have maybe gone down since we've increased accessibility on the platform, but we haven't done that research.
A lot of your demographic data that you use for like the cohorts and stuff is from a survey. Do you use any information like from people who take multiple courses and try to determine some sort of demographic data from that? It may be, so do you use anything outside of just the surveys to determine?
Are you asking about a sort of market research?
Well, yeah, a lot of the time, a lot of the research you showed, you say, oh, it's the same whether it was someone with an advanced degree or with someone with new to it, and that's all I assume is from the initial survey that you ask people. But do you use anything outside, like maybe their performance in another course, to determine sort of what the cohort they belong in?
I would say very rarely. We have done that kind of analysis of both which courses are associated with taking which other courses, or we've sometimes cohorted students based on this student has many certificates or few. By and large, we just haven't had time to do that sort of thing. So we mostly looked at demographic information from surveys and what we would pull out of IPs. So we have a lot of geocoding where we can, with the size of data that we have, geocoding actually lets us look at a lot of interesting side effects by correlating with things with country.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a follow-up question to his question, and then another question. The follow-up question to his question is, do you track students across various courses so you can track, like, oh, the student did really well in this course, but not so well in this course, so maybe that course wasn't designed as well. How can we improve that course? Do you do that kind of research?
We have that data. To the best of my knowledge, we have not done hardly any analysis like that because there are so many interesting things to look at, and we haven't looked at all of them.
So that is a fantastic question for me to segue into telling you about an initiative that we have here that we started this past fall. It's really in sort of almost, I would even call it beta, something called RDX, which is the Research Data Exchange. And we've made that available only to a certain subsection of our members, just as kind of almost an experiment. And concerns that Piotr pointed to earlier around FERPA and data sharing, our fantastic legal team sort of worked out a methodology. Engineering right now is working through the process of doing a kind of partially de-identified data dump. The whole point of that is that when we can sort of make sure that we have a de-identified data that reaches a threshold that matches FERPA and makes our partners comfortable, we can do cross-partner sharing of data. And when that becomes robust, these kinds of questions, we are very hopeful our partners will explore and start to be able to answer.
Okay. And then my second question is also sort of similar, but is, you talk about how you do all this research and what are the, what the research is showing is good design of course, and then you work with your university partners. But how closely do you work with these university partners to try and really implement these instructional design changes in the courses? Because edX, especially open edX, is sort of here, run, do what you want with it, but, you know, if there is research out there showing, you know, here's a good design of a course, it would really behoove you to sort of follow it.
Yeah, so that's a large part of what our partner managers do. They kind of act as consultants, so to speak, with our course teams. You know, we do have trainings. I just got back from a trip that involved a faculty and instructor workshop. And what I'm finding is that those folks, that audience is responding very well to research. If we can pull out these best practices and say, look, you know, this is what we're seeing, and they want to design assessments, they want to structure courses, they want to present material in the way that they feel will be most effective. And so there's a thirst for that, and that's one of the things that we're really trying to provide for them. It will work its way into our documentation, it will work its way into, again, to our training materials. But it is a large task, and also we are very sensitive to our partners, especially the more mature organizations. They know what they're doing, right? They don't necessarily need this kind of consulting from us. So it's a evolving relationship, but they respond very well to data.
Can you push up just anecdotally, for example, some feedback that sort of made its way back in and had an impact on the instructional design?
I would love to tell you that. So just recently, I was talking with our media team, and this is sort of a generalization, but I'll just, so there was some, you know, really good research that came out about video length, and it's not true in all cases, and it's not should not be universally applied, but we've learned a lot about shorter, you know, videos tend to have greater completion, and that can lead, with lots of caveats and asterisks, that can lead to cognitive skill increases and retainment of information. So, with all of those caveats, it's still a really strong argument to be able to say that you should be making tighter, shorter videos with lots of interleaved, you know, questions or attempts to do a problem or what have you. Believe it or not, in the early days, I hear from our media team, there was a lot of resistance to taking that 30-minute video and making it shorter. And so that was a frustration, but with this 60 minutes. So with this data and with continually, you know, massaging it and working with our partners, we're seeing reception to making shorter videos. And if anybody from the media team wants to add to that or whatnot, Dan, do you have a response?
Comment about MOOC research in general, because it's a very good question about the feedback loop. I think like the first 2-3 years, if we're in our 4th year now, I don't need it. I don't want to record it. Research has been focused only on big statements, right? Certification rates, learning, all these things. So we haven't really seen the feedback loop come back to course design. And hopefully that will happen, but like it's a really hard problem right now because the people that are doing the most with the data are high-powered researchers who are just there to like show big results, right? So it's not necessarily all the way back yet to course design. So I think, so what I say is it's a challenge, right? But we have to meet the challenge.
But I mean, you can certainly extrapolate like from extant data related to cognitive load on just reading and, you know, in terms of chunking information and all these other sort of things as to why, for example, long videos. I mean, I'm sure there's all kinds of other research about media,
yeah, there is.
Attention span, and all the rest that would be there. But
no, I agree with you completely. But as a researcher, like that's our goal needs to transform into how do we get this back to course design, and that's to the research community that's here.
And that kind of sums up the research part of my job.
Just mention, by the way, that we're starting to get there. This is a list of all of the randomized control trials on content running edX courses, and that number has been going up tremendously. We're facilitating maybe the ones in blue we're facilitating. The one in pink, I guess, is from your former advisor. He's got 17 in his course. Yep. That's David Pritchard. And a lot of our other courses are doing this as well. And each of these is translating either to statistical significance or interesting results about how to improve teaching and learning.
Yeah, I'll add one more comment. I mean, there are currently over 800 courses on edX. Right? There are 120 at Harvard. Right? Mm-hmm. So how does the proportion match up? Right? Like, so there needs to be more. So I'm not advocating against researchers and them saying we've got to connect it back to course.
I agree we need more, but we're starting to see quite a fair bit. This is a lot more than we did a year ago.
Sure.
I would just like to corroborate what you said about short videos. I've been looking on YouTube for science videos to sort of refresh my memory about what I learned at undergraduate many years ago. And I find that there are some short videos, about 10 minutes or so, which are very compelling, and which there is sort of groupings too. One leads to another, in terms of where your interest goes, as opposed to the 1 hour lectures, which are also there. So I find it very exciting to, look at that type of format.
And I think I'm always very aware of the asterisks and the caveats when it comes to research, particularly on video. You just brought up something I think is really important. You said the 1 hour lecture, right? And so there's two things there. It's the length, and then there's the delivery. And so that's two factors that might be hurting attention and completion. Could we imagine a 1 hour, incredibly riveting, educational video that you watched to the end and you remembered everything? I don't know, but I mean, I don't know about you, but like I watched all of Ken Burns' baseball, thrilled, right? And I learned a lot. I don't know that I've retained it though. That was a long time ago. Yeah, probably have not retained it. Yeah.
The results we had from traditional education research well before books said you can make a documentary that's fun and it's engaging. You remember all stuff unless you're actually manipulating information yourself. You need to manipulate information to retain it. So.
Yeah, which then brings you to make them short, so then it's constant interaction. Yes?
I'd like to change the topic real quick to the remediation points you brought up. So it seems to me that within the research you've done, which is fantastic, the 2 points that we're really focused on were, it seems to me, content-specific resources and tools at the end. We looked at that kind of annotation, so tools. At the same time, I've seen a fair amount of research, actually some X-Talks at MIT, about metacognitive frameworks and how those do a tremendous amount, apparently, especially for non-US students and students who lack the frameworks built into what we consider to be education. Building those into the course of the length of a course can also be a tremendous remediation factor. So I was curious if there's any data, you've collected anything on that so far.
Not within edX, but we have seen people doing interventions, different types of mindset interventions in the ecosystem around edX. So edX is about 140 people. The ecosystem around edX is thousands of people. And so most of the kind of interventions we rely on that ecosystem to do. Within edX, the design of the platform was based on promoting self-regulation. So you'll see a lot of ways in which students can self-navigate remediations, a lot of ways in which students can monitor their own learning, monitor their progress, monitor their progression, go to specific places, things like that. Those are very thoughtfully designed exactly to promote self-regulation, to promote the development of self-regulatory skills. But beyond that, we really haven't done much. I think you'll see a lot more in conferences like Learning at Scale around this area.
I guess my question is about what's going on with research and also engineering to make the platform more adaptive and to provide some scope. So I'm part of Harvard's research team, and when we try and take lessons and build them so we can do randomized experiments and then adapt so that we give different remediation to those people who need it, so personalization, we often kind of have to build plugins that will send data back in real time, to let us smoothly go from experimenting to personalizing. So I was curious what kind of research efforts there are, or how the research team, who I know is really interested in this kind of work, interfaces with product to kind of make this more available. So that anyone can kind of author mini experiments or author some kind of adaptive personalization.
So there are, I think, a few bits and pieces out there. Mini experiments you could already do. The platform had randomized controlled trials basically from day zero. There was a gap of basically maybe day 180 through maybe a year after that where they were missing, but then they came back. So randomization we have. We have a few frameworks that do very simple types of adaptive. So we have adaptive hinting. We've done experiments around building Xbox for crowdsourced adaptive hinting. Carnegie Mellon OLI as an open source platform contributed back a lot around adaptive hinting. We don't have frameworks for real-time data analysis. That's something I've tried to champion in the organization. How long, Gabe? Yes, and we haven't gotten to the point where we can deliver data or process or do anything with event data in real time, unfortunately. I'm optimistic that we will do something going forward so that's moving forward more on our radar. And I think product pressure from external partners, especially key ones like Harvard of the type that you're currently applying, will be very helpful towards making that happen.
He's a good champion. Everyone outside, he's our champion too.
So, for Joseph is with Harvard X. He actually also mentioned organize a workshop where Don't Book will brief review, and I met. That was a very great service. So thank you.
A different question on the forums. There's a tremendous amount of activity in some of the courses, and have you used any of the information gathered in forum discussions to, any research that you can share or that you've looked at that has to do with, say, maybe topics or, questions people don't know about, or, sort of same similar themes, or even as much as making like an AI robot that's going to answer people's questions in the future. I know that's, probably a little bit beyond the scope.
Well, so I think that we have looked at a lot of forums data in a lot of different ways. It's very hard to come up with coherent stories here because there have been so many attempts around looking at forums data. We have not tried to do things like AI robots in order to answer student questions, but in the MIT X days, we had a community question answering system, a clone of Stack Overflow, and that did something just as good. It let students find. Sorry? What? Oh, okay. So we had a system students could ask questions, other students would answer them, and instead of using computer intelligence, we used human intelligence to find those answers, and questions did not get repeated because they were very good search tools. So a lot of what we've been doing around this is what I would call stupid tutoring systems rather than intelligent tutoring systems, where you have the same idea, but you put human intelligence instead of machine intelligence. And students, if they ask a question, would get an answer within 12 minutes. 90-something% of questions were answered, but students actually found answers 300 times as often as they would ask questions, which is why that worked so well. So we've got things along those lines. We've correlated, actually, Daniel Seaton was spearheading a lot of this work. We've correlated usage of different resources, including forums, with educational outcomes. We've done analyses of the types of posted forums, which was work that was facilitated by Daniel. I think you can keep going about a few other things.
Yeah, I know some, there's a group at Stanford that sort of was looking at keywords that perhaps prompted a moment when a student was going to drop out the course or not do the assessment. And so, one obvious keyword is confusion. I'm confused, right? But one of the problems with, not problems, one of the challenges of that is that it's hard to universally apply that because the content of the course, so they're confused about what. So for that course, you might be able to do a simple keyword search within your forum data to find out who's confused and then maybe do an intervention. But if you're going to try and develop any sort of machine learning response, automatic response, it's going to be really course specific, and that's a lot to develop for one class. Again, in the K-12 space, that might make a lot of sense when the subjects are smaller, but it's really interesting work. And I think hopefully we'll see more of it. Ned? Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you for pointing. I hate that blind spot you have when you're up front. Please, I'm going to repeat your question definitely, because
Very lovely. The data that you do have on hand, are there any exemplary universities that are using it? Any of your partner universities that are using it for instructional design purposes to make changes or to create new courses based on data?
so there was a question of whether or not the data is made available to our partners if the instructional design teams are actually using it to better their courses. Yeah, so yes, we have some partners and are so grateful that we do who have a wonderful relationship between their research team and their instructional designers and course teams. And it has a lot to do with the way in which the university has been able to structure, the folks who are working on educational research and those who are creating the courses. It can be difficult for some partner universities if they don't have really good research teams and tools, but we have seen quite a bit of that at some of our most active partners. I mean, MIT and Harvard being these examples. Other than them, yes, Berkeley's good at it. University of Queensland's really good at it, and others. But sorry. And UBC, I don't want to leave anybody out because there's really good active partners. And Davidson is really good at it. Oh man, and any others that are really good at it, yay. Yeah. So and that's something we would want to encourage, right? Is going onto a campus and sort of seeing what kind of communication flow they have and trying to either present them with some structures they might set up. Sometimes even just saying, hey, edX is coming. We want in the room to see researchers and instructors. I did this at a university recently, and the course teams were like, I didn't know there was research happening on campus with our course data. Yeah, so whatever we can do to facilitate that.
You mentioned looking at students outside the United States. There was a certain classification who needed some help with some cognitive skills or something to that effect, and I was wondering if there was any correlation, or if you could extrapolate audience United States, people from the United States who are using the tool, but who might be, let's say, from a different socioeconomic strata, and for some other reason may have a different experience of education and the tool, and whether or not we're observing a need to sort of help them with scaffolding learning or any sort of assistance in that capacity.
For you.
I think the answer is that is about the main things we would like to look at eventually once we have more researchers.
Although, just recently there was a piece published in Science by Justin Reich and Jonathan, I can't remember Jonathan Hansen, thank you. That did look at socioeconomic status related to completion rates in courses. Highly recommend.
So you looked at it correlated with geocoding, yes.
Yeah, geocoding. Yes, they looked at zip codes and made some assumptions about folks on the platform based on zip code. Yeah.
Let's take one last question.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, so kind of a follow-up to your previous question. I know this isn't like a really long answer, but how does the Insights product sort of figure into giving instructors data feedback about their students' performance? And I'm just kind of curious why that hasn't come up at all as a way that instructors might be getting feedback on course design.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. I should have brought that up.
Hi, I'm Gabe. I'm the manager of the analytics team at edX, and my team maintains Insights, so I can give some answers about that. So we offer several tools to instructors in Insights. One is answer distribution tool. So as they publish problems, it will show you common answers, including common misconceptions. So if you've got a multiple choice question that's got A, B, and C, a lot of people are answering B, even though that's incorrect. You can see that pretty quickly in the data. And so we've sort of erred toward exposing the raw data to people and letting them make inference about that themselves, as opposed to trying to do fancy machine learning and stuff and try to, tell them what it means. So similarly, along that vein, we have data about video interaction, and so there we'll show parts of the videos that people watched repeatedly, so you can see sort of spikes in engagement with the videos in areas that might be confusing, or where the instructor blew through a topic way too fast, that sort of thing.
Wait, so you're exposing that to the instructors themselves?
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so that, as they go to revise the videos for the next run of the course, they have a lot more information about what was effective and what wasn't. You can also see drop-off where people were not interested in portions of the course.
When your hour-long course gets all
Yeah.
drop off in the first 10 minutes. Maybe
Or sometimes people won't cut out stuff that they really should have cut from the video. It'll be like an advertisement about on-campus club.
And I'll mention here that this sort of ties back, that strategy ties back to research. So the initial video analytics were done by Daniel Seaton, who is in the room, Philip Woe, who is at the University of Rochester, and Juho Kip, who is, I think, Heist right now? That's where he'll be next year. He's doing a year sour right now. I'm not actually Stanford. That's Stanford right now. And those actually show that those spikes, sometimes they were really interesting things. The trackers blowing up at people, students watch that over and over and over. Sometimes they were really confusing parts. And so that decision to flag this as we provide the data rather than we provide judgment was based on a lot of that prior analysis from the research community. So I think that was the last question as well.
Last question. Thank you, Peter and Nina. Thank you very much.